Hello, this is Mr. Shank,
And I'm Mr. Woods.
and this is In the Back Room, Ancient China. And Mr. Woods, why don't you tell the audience what we're doing here?
Okay, so this podcast that you're going to be listening to, In the Backroom, is where Mr. Shank and I are going to be just discussing topics. Topics we cover in world history class, and just sort of anything that comes up organically as we experiment in conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So, try to make it as entertaining as possible and also informational. So that way you have another source for you guys to study from and to listen to and to be entertained.
We hope you enjoy. This is the inaugural episode, first of many, hopefully. And I guess we'll just get right to it. Enjoy the show.
All right, so first, do you want to start out with the not metaphorical, but the mythical dynasty?
Yeah. So this the Xia dynasty, most likely legendary. There's, as far as I'm aware of, no archaeological evidence that says anything about it being real, aside from some later art talking about this fellow Yu the engineer.
They have a crash course on you, the engineer, too.
Specifically
Yeah,
on him?
specifically.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's why you, for those of you listening, not you. Though you may one day become an engineer, we're going to assume you're not yet.
Legendary you, the engineer.
And this dynasty is likely a fabrication, as Mr. John Green talks about. Probably fabricated by the Zhou dynasty to create an excuse for overthrowing the Shang dynasty. So if you want to lead us into the Shang dynasty.
Yeah, the Shang dynasty from about 1600 to 1046 BCE. And if you remember, BCE is before Common Era. We also know that as before Christ. And this is the early Chinese script that we found, which was on oracle bones. And what are oracle bones?
Yeah, so oracle bones are kind of a strange thing where we've got these bones, animal bones, and hopefully just animal bones, and like tortoise shells and things like that, where they've engraved questions, I guess you could say, for their ancestors, for the gods, and then these would be very ritualistically placed into a fire, heated until they crack, and then some wise priest or soothsayer of some kind would interpret those cracks as answers to the questions that were asked. I was telling my students, much like if you go get your palm read today, someone is going to interpret that information and provide you with an answer, kind of that oracle figure.
Are they yes and no questions?
I don't know. I would assume they have to be relatively basic questions. I don't think you could ask what is the meaning of life and get a detailed answer.
Like the 8-ball questions that you shake up, or
yeah, I mean, I feel like that's about where it would be if I was thinking of it like that.
And they would also, with the Shang dynasty, you have ancestor worship, you have bronze casting, which is, you are pouring that hot liquid metal into a shape of whatever it may be. You could have maybe eventually the Qin dynasty will have arrows and so forth, but you can basically make weapons at an efficient rate. You could also make different parts and so forth at a much more efficient rate. And jade, if you're familiar with jade, the mineral, that green mineral that used kind of typically for decoration on like necklaces and things like that.
And I was just pulling up on the computer here. I had a lot of students ask me why jade had particular significance. And so aside from probably being readily available for the Chinese, I was looking into this a little bit more. And my cursory Google search, to give Google some credit here.
Gotta give credit, man.
You do have to give credit. You can't just do things
willy-nilly.
Providing someone some credit. So it says that jade is a precious stone that has 5 virtues: benevolence, righteousness, wisdom, bravery, and honesty. Was that 5? Yeah, okay.
Sounded like 5.
They actually list 6. There's clean there too. So I don't know about the counting that Google has going on, but yeah. So apparently it's more than just a precious stone, but it represents something. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Mulan. So Mulan is given beads to represent beauty, I believe it is, from her grandmother as she prepares to meet the matchmaker.
And she also worships her ancestors, too.
Yes, she does. And she's given a talisman for balance that we'll get into in a minute that is yin and yang.
Yin and yang.
Interesting.
So the next dynasty is the Zhou. Zhao?
Yeah, I think you had it right the first time. I say Joe, but that's because
Zhou.
I have a hard non-Eastern accent that I can't break.
Zhou.
But yeah, I would say it's like Zhou.
Zhou. But it's spelled, Zhou. And from 1046 to 256 BC. So as you know, time is kind of going down and working its way towards 0. So the dates don't seem correct. They are. It's just we're working backwards on our Christian calendar.
Right.
And
I mean,
calendar keeping is very important these days.
It is. You have to have you have to have an accurate calendar, but it is important to do your best not to cry when talking about it.
I do get pretty teary-eyed sometimes.
I mean, especially when you talk about the change from the Julian calendar to like the Gregorian calendar, or like a non Western, like a lunar calendar. I mean, just it's like watching a sad movie. It just makes me teary-eyed.
Yeah. Same. But this is where we get feudalism from, the Zhou dynasty.
And do you want to talk about feudalism for a minute? I mean, I don't want to get into.
I want to briefly go over it just because
later episode.
Right? Yeah, especially with Japan in the Middle Ages, we're going to dive deep into that. But it's a government style essentially where you're exchanging land for military service, or the peasants, they're not going to be serving the military, but they're going to be working the land. So it just depends on where you rank in the social pyramid. Obviously, at the top, you're going to be a king or an emperor, but you're going to not have to work in the fields or anything like that, or serve in the military. Serve in the military, you might try.
I feel like the peasants, though. I mean, they're like conscripted into the military to be kind of the cannon fodder.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like they don't really have much of a choice.
If they're needed, they need to. Yeah, they'll be thrown in there.
But they're definitely not like professionally trained soldiers or.
No, it'd be like throwing the 8th graders into like, hey, you're going to go to war tomorrow.
Yeah. So
good luck.
World War II.
Essentially, yeah. And then cast iron as well. Do you want to dig in a little bit cast iron?
Yeah, I mean it's essentially the same process as casting bronze, in that you're going to be pouring this superheated liquid metal into pre-made molds.
Like a blast furnace?
Yeah, you do have to have a blast furnace, exactly, for iron, because iron has a higher melting point. So you have to have that influx of oxygen to really superheat that metal. I told my students, think of it as like you have a fire, like a campfire that's going out, and so if you put more wood on it, you want to blow on those coals to rekindle that flame.
That's true.
It's kind of the same concept, just on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm. And as we see these dynasties kind of coming and going, the Zhou dynasty is the one that kind of came up with the mandate of heaven and this whole dynastic cycle. That's why you see so many different dynasties in China, because they essentially said, well, the gods are no longer in the favor of the the Shang dynasty, and now it's the Zhou dynasty's turn. Whether it be from famine, whether it be from peasant uprising, or all the other catastrophic things that could possibly happen.
And we have the luxury as historians in the modern age, looking back on the ancient past, to be able to say, okay, well, there's all these other reasons that the dynasty fell. We can look and see that, okay, so this peasant uprising was caused by famine, which was caused by mineral depletion from the soil. But if you're in the moment in ancient China before modern science, you're going to blame that famine on something. You want an explanation. So if you can't test the soil and determine that maybe you've exhausted the nutrients, you're going to say that, okay, well, the gods have placed a famine on us for some reason. Well, let's think about why. well, it's probably the ruler's fault because he's supposed to make the gods happy, and if they're killing us, then they're not happy.
Yeah, it seemed like you almost have a direct line to the gods, and
Yeah.
you should be like speaking with them and saying, "Hey, why be a famines? Hey, well, like you said, must be displeased with me."
And in the text of the original poem, the Ode to Mulan or Ballad of Mulan, they actually refer to the emperor as the son of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of gives that connection. His role in society is to be the intermediary between humans and the divine.
It mentions that in the book, the Son of Heaven.
Does it?
Yeah, It does say about that, and I think I mentioned that in class too, because he is kind of seen as the son. So if we move on, the Zhao, eventually they kind of created their own storm there with that mentality, because it means that even though they ruled for 700 some plus years, they're eventually going to lose favor with the gods, whether that's your belief or not. They will. But China will go into a warring states period, and as John Green says, it's a period in which states warred, or how does he phrase it? Is that right?
I believe he says that the Warring States period is a war between states over periods.
Yeah, something like
or
that.
Or something to that effect.
Something to that effect. And essentially, it's basically, you can categorize it like a civil war.
Yeah.
You have this from 256 BC to 221 BC, kind of chaotic, and they're not unified at this point.
Now, do you want to talk about the quest to counter the chaos of the Warring States period? I think this would be a good. I didn't place it. Yeah, I didn't place it there whenever I was talking about it in class. But hindsight, I think that would have been a good place.
That actually would have been better. You're right.
Yeah.
So because, as Mr. Woods just said, because of all the chaos going on during this Warring States period, where you have constant civil war between all these different groups of people in China, they needed somebody to kind of come in and bring balance to this chaos. And one of the social philosophies was Confucianism. And we know him as Confucius, but in Kongfuzi.
Yeah.
Is that how you would spell it? With the Q and the U?
Well, so I've seen it as like Con Q and as Kong Fu Z.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely certain what this is not a language base that I'm familiar with whatsoever. So I don't know. All I know is that when we try to represent like ancient languages or foreign languages in general using Latin characters, using our alphabet, we try to match the sounds to our letters. So I can assume that it would sound like that, but obviously that his name wouldn't look quite like that. Though I don't know why there's the difference of the two, but I have found both as
I've seen both. That kind of threw me off a little bit. I was like, "What's going on?" But we just call him Confucius, and he was wrote. Well, he didn't write, but his students wrote in the Analects, which is one of the books that at least my class has seen that, and I've shown that directly that I am like
you're reading.
I'm reading it. Yes, it's kind of the book that I read here, and I have others at home that I read. But it's good because it does provide some good a way to conduct yourself in almost every situation you can possibly think of. And if people are constantly at war with one another, you kind of need some type of bright light in there. You need somebody to be like, hey, stop messing around. This is how you should act.
I think that's something important just in society in general. I think I have not read the Analects, but my understanding of it is it's kind of a guide of understanding your position in any relationship you're in. And this can span multiple, right? One person can be multiple things, but you're only in any given circumstance going to be one. So for example, right now we are seated together as friend and friend, one could say, right, according to those relationships in Confucianism. But if I go home, so I then am the husband in the husband and wife role, but I'm also father in the father and son, or barring a patriarchal society, father and daughter. But so there's multiple relationships now hold different roles depending on which interaction I'm a part of.
Right.
And so my understanding of the text, the Analects, is to let you know or help you understand what your guess what your role in each of those is and how you should act.
Yeah, how you should conduct yourself in those situations, and it'll start out like the master says, and they just kind of go from, it's almost like you're reading off a bunch of his quotes in a way, but the quotes itself show you how you should be acting in front of everybody. So sometimes the references you don't know. I mean, the book does a decent job of like, hey, this is this person from this time period, but in general, it's about the 5 basic relationships, which we talked about in class, and that filial piety, which is the respect for elders, which is a good thing to practice no matter what you're trying to do, whether it be a social philosophy or it be just being a good person.
And this is beyond respect for just like parents or adults, but my understanding is it's to the degree of reverence. So it's almost like a worship-based respect to a degree, and it's to any elder, not even necessarily someone that you have a relationship with, but even just elders in general. Is that am I right on
Yeah,
that?
you're right, and that's why the ancestor worship is a big part of it too, because it's not like, okay, they're dead now, we don't have to worry about them anymore. It's you got to keep them in your mind. You got to keep that respect is constantly there for them. But yeah, the 5 basic relationships, as we said, are ruler to subject, father to son, husband to wife, older brother to younger brother, friend to friend. Those are basic ones. They're not all of them, but they are the most basic ones that we discuss in the class.
And it's a personal philosophy too. Like just because one side of the relationship isn't meeting their responsibility or being holding that side properly, it doesn't give you an excuse to abandon your side of that relationship. I think John Green gives the example of the father and son, right? Even if the father is not educating his son and taking care of him, it doesn't give the son the right to disrespect the father.
No, not at all. Doesn't matter.
Right.
And education. Well, sorry. Do you want to talk about Ren and Lee?
Oh, okay. So yeah, Ren and Lee. And again, I'm no expert on this area in particular, but my understanding is that Ren is how to word this. Ren is the expectation of your role or how to act properly in a given situation, and I believe Lee is kind of that reverence of elders, specifically referring to kind of like the ritual end of ancestral worship. I think, and I know that it's more complex than that. I've probably done a terrible job of summarizing that, but at the very basic level, that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's essentially what it's saying here. I mean, they're incredibly complex ideas, but that's about this general as we're gonna get with it. What you just said. So, as I'm just looking through it again.
And if you want to take us into education, because after all, back in the good old days, you were the Confucian class.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we used to split the classes up, and Mr. Woods was legalism approach.
Fitting.
Some of you may or may not know, Miss Lewis, Tara Lewis. She did Taoism. She's very, very spiritual, very like easygoing. It was great. And with myself, I did Confucianism because I always have a high emphasis on education, such as my basketball players know very well. Education comes first before school. Sorry, before your athletics.
Because student athlete, right?
Yes, student athlete. The student comes first, then the athlete. But yeah, in order for your society to be more of a functioning society in general, you have to have the mass population educated. It's going to make things so much easier. I rather have a bunch of well-educated individuals roaming around my society than a bunch of essentially bumbling idiots.
Right, which is in many cases what we see, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate, but sometimes true.
Yeah.
And then, since it's still in the Warring States period, this wasn't the only thing that was going on around this time. This is when we get into Taoism, or also known as Taoism. It's just kind of either the D or the T. I typically use Taoism, just the way my own personal preference.
Yeah, I'm the same on that. Yeah, I tend to just reference it as Taoism, but I I don't know if it falls along the same lines as what we were talking about with the name of Confucius. I don't know why there's two separate ways of spelling them, but I do tend to align with Taoism just for general reference.
Right. The founder being Lao Tzu, which is old master, which if that's your definition for the vocabulary, that is, if you said founder of Taoism, that's fine, but if you just said old master, that will not work.
No, we must expand.
Yes, okay, definitely. And it's nice that lousy kind of sounds like lazy, because that's what I kind of equated to, because you're just doing like a lousy job, you're just doing like a lazy job. I think this is from Terra, when she said ancient hippies.
Yes.
I use that reference because it's pretty accurate, because they're at one with nature. They're going with I equate it to the flow of water.
That's a good way of thinking.
If you put water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water in a colder environment, it's going to freeze. It's not going to say, you know what, I don't really feel like freezing. It's just, I'm freezing now. I'm going to be an ice cube. Hey, it's getting warmer out. I'm going to melt. It just be like water. And a lot of, I said, is water strong? And some kids said, no, it's not really that strong. Water's just, water. So I go, tell the people in the Carolinas that water isn't strong.
Right, yes.
And they're like, oh yeah, you are definitely right. So water can be very intense, obviously during, hurricanes and flooding and so forth. And it can also be very calm, like on a nice summer day on a lake where you're just kind of out there relaxing, fishing and whatnot. This also has the yin and the yang. Confucianism did too. I don't know if we mentioned that, but this has the balancing forces in the universe. You have down here Tao Te Ching.
Yes. So the Tao Te Ching, or the Way of Virtue, is the kind of collection of writings associated with Taoism. And so Taoism's main focus, my understanding, it goes along with what you were saying with the water, it's the Tao, the way. So they focus on what they see as sort of the way of moving through life, which is at peace with nature, harmony in all things. And so it's like this universal force that connects things and binds us all together.
Sounds like Star Wars.
Obi-Wan there.
I really hope they make a Obi-Wan movie.
No, that'd be fabulous.
They're supposed to, but Han Solo kind of killed it for everything.
Yeah.
The movie was pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
I don't know, did you see it?
I've seen enough of it to know.
The previews are enough of it, honestly.
That was my assumption. I figured that I'll watch it when they put it on Netflix like they did the others.
And somebody pays you to watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
About the only way you can watch it.
Though, I am disappointed because I thought Rogue One was so good.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the 7 and 8 and then the Han Solo movie have sort of dropped the ball. I don't understand why. I don't know. Reinventing the wheel in a different image is just not working.
It isn't. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know that's just like falling off like that magic of the 70s and 80s, or
it may be because I look back on the prequel series 1, 2, and 3, and
they're better than the newer ones.
They are better than the newer ones.
Sad.
They are better than the newer ones, and there's good character development. I think there's some poor casting in some of them.
I agree with that.
But I think it became more about money at some point in there around the second movie. But I don't know. I still supremely enjoy them. I am excited that they're bringing back the animated series, the Clone Wars.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. Yeah,
my son and I watch the original one all the time. He loves it. He loves it. And I mean, it has a core story too. It's actually pretty well done. So I'm excited to see what happens with that.
That's like with anything here. It's all about kind of the story and how things kind of unfold. And
That's
just as in here, just to cycle back with history, it's the story is, this is one long story is really what it is, but it's in different places in different parts of the world, and we're just trying to piece it all together because essentially if this is one giant book, some pages are ripped out and lost forever, some pages we just randomly find and put it in there, and the books are in different languages, so we're trying our best to piece our human past together, okay, to better see the future.
I was trying to look too, since we're talking about symbols, you mentioned yin and yang representing balance. I was trying to look up precisely what so yin and yang is also representative of Confucianism,
Mm-hmm.
but the other symbol that were given for Confucianism, I was trying to find out exactly what it meant. The only thing that I have been able to find is that there's multiple symbols they use. I don't know if this particular one is a combination of more than one, but so I found that the symbol for water is used, which you would think would relate more to Taoism. But then I've also seen that the symbol for scholar is used, and in my mind, that is appropriate for Confucianism.
Mm-hmm. It would be, yeah.
And for those of you in my class, you should know scholar. It was our word of the day today, right? The condition of schooling, right? Someone who has been schooled or has received schooling, which, with education being so important, fits well with Confucianism.
So we could probably move on to the Chin, or do you want to talk about Buddhism over there?
Yeah,
We could throw that in there. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Let's talk about Buddhism quick, and we're not gonna expand on this too much, just because we will at some point be releasing an episode for India. It just so happened that this lined up with where we are in the curriculum. We figured we'd just go with China for today. But so Buddhism is I wouldn't call it a religion because it doesn't require belief in a divine, and actually I think it doesn't matter if you even if you do believe in some divine figure. It's not exclusive. You can't. It's not that you can't be Buddhist because you believe in some divine or the absence of belief. So I would say it's agnostic to actual religious belief. It's more of a philosophy of mind
philosophy of
than
mind.
anything.
That's partly why it picked up so well in China and stayed in countries like Japan and so forth, because it wasn't like they had to tear down their old foundations of their religion, just kind of easily adapted to their already existing religion, which made it incredibly easy to adapt. But yeah, with Buddhism, there's a lot of things you can just learn from that in general.
We attribute the spread of Buddhism to China to do you pronounce his name Ahsoka or Ashoka?
I go back and forth. I say Ahsoka.
I do pronounce it both ways because I've seen it written both ways.
I have too. Ashoka is from Star Wars again, isn't
Yeah,
it? Or is it Ahsoka?
I think it's Ahsoka in Star Wars.
I think it's Ahsoka too,
I think
yeah.
it's Ahsoka in Star Wars. But yeah, so I try to dabble in both just for the sake of, I mean, you're talking about ancient languages and ancient parts of the world. Multiple spellings of the same word is not uncommon at all.
And pronunciations.
Because, I mean, how many people alive today speak the same language or were there when this was developed, and that has carried down precisely the same pronunciation or even the same cadence of voice. So I think that I try to give as many variants as possible.
Well, yeah, that's like my first name is Jonathan. Some people pronounce it that way, but it's actually Joe Nathan.
Joe Nathan, right.
Joe Nathan.
Right.
So it's just on how you pronounce it, So with the founder being Siddhartha Gautama or Gautama, again, however you want to pronounce it, it's up to you. He kind of came up with I use the noble number, which my students know as 48 to help you remember. The Four Noble Truths, and the last noble truth the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. And it's basically laying a map out for nirvana.
Right. And so nirvana is this oneness of mind where you've kind of lost sight of your individual self, your individual consciousness, and you've alleviated suffering inside of yourself and rid yourself of desire. So that you can be at peace. And the novelty of Buddhism is that that nirvana can be achieved in a single lifetime. It doesn't require, the many passages of life through reincarnation or samsara like its predecessor Hinduism. And I shouldn't say predecessor because I guess it would be at the same time, really, but earlier for sure. But Hinduism required you to continually be reborn, whereas Buddhism, though that may have to happen, it's not contingent on reaching nirvana.
Yeah, you could do it in one lifetime.
Right.
It is possible. So that was very attractive to a lot of people in China. When you have the Mahayana Buddhism, especially, because that they were essentially worshiping Buddha, even though Buddha never wanted to be worshipped as a god. He was seen by the Hindus as an incarnation of God, but it's just all in how you interpret it and what you decide essentially to believe in.
Right. Yeah. China took that extra step to kind of venerate him as a divine figure, whereas most of like Indian Buddhism's, I think Theravada Buddhism, where they see him as the teacher.
Mm-hmm. That's what they don't have. They don't even have any like do they have statues of him with Theravada?
I don't know.
Because that'd be veneration, and I don't think they do veneration.
Yeah, that'd be like graven images or something. So I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but
maybe
I've never been wrong, so probably
the Dalai Lama has some statues somewhere.
Dalai Lama. Yes. There's definitely some Lama statues out
Lamas, there. Yes.
Some giant ones. So yeah, all of this is, whether it be Confucianism or Taoism and Buddhism, it's to get people in line, because when you're constantly at war with one another, it's not very productive for anything. Okay, fighting just brings on more fighting, and Confucius and Lao Tzu and Buddha kind of just saw that as, this needs to end. This is just ridiculous. So these aren't religions. They don't have to be. But I told my class, anything can be religion. If you want to start worshiping this Chromebook that's right in front of me, by all means, devote a Sunday to it.
I mean, many students do already venerate their technology.
Yes, there's several hours of worship going on with that game, which
the
F word, which will not be mentioned in this aforementioned podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just want to bring the chaos down to back to normal, back to a non-chaotic period, and eventually that will happen with the
Qin dynasty.
The Qin dynasty,
which interestingly enough adopts the philosophy from the Warring States period of legalism, which of the given ones we've talked about, those all sound pretty decent ways to manage a populace, but also do that in a productive manner, in a peaceful manner to some degree. And then you have legalism, founded by Han Feizi, which focuses on the beneficial side, that if you do good things, you'll be very richly rewarded, though that kind of gets set aside, and the emphasis is really on punishing bad deeds very harshly.
Extreme deed,
yeah. Bad deeds being interpreted by the leader, who can really see anything as bad if they choose to.
Don't speak bad about the government.
No,
don't say you don't like the rule.
Can't do that.
There's no freedom of speech. I don't think you guys realize how important some of our basic rights are here in America, and we kind of set a lot of the foundations for other countries as well.
Well, and I think the danger too is that we tend to ignore the importance of those things. We take it for granted, and it can very easily slip away. I mean, I had the conversation with some students last year about free speech, and that it doesn't mean that you have to like what you hear.
Or agree.
I think probably one of the most important elements of free speech is that you have to sometimes hear things that you disagree with, because, I mean, if you're only hearing things you agree with, you're not hearing the whole story.
Right.
We don't live in a utopian paradise. So I think
don't
if
we
you...
I feel like we do.
Right now in this room, I believe so. The back room is very utopian. Thomas More would be pleased.
Sir Thomas More. He's been knighted. Let's get
this
right.
He has been knighted. How dare I? Although it didn't matter. The next blade to touch his neck took it off. So
you'll learn about that later.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So let's talk about Yin Zheng, or Qin Shuai Hongdi.
Qin Shuai Huangdi. Qin Shuai Huangdi, he came in there, as some of you saw with the Mankind video, came in there with those crossbows.
Yeah.
And used those very efficiently, and in about 9 years conquers all those ridiculous warring states that couldn't get over. He just conquers them all. He says, you know what, you guys, I'm just conquering all of you, and I'm going to do it efficiently, and just rolling through China. I mean, 9 years maybe to you guys seems like a long time, but if you're rolling through that much territory that quickly, that's incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
And this happens, and he is in power about 221 to 207 BCE.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting things is that he actually started that conquest at 13.
Yeah, which most 13-year-olds do.
I mean, it seems like they have the capability to definitely mass destruction is something they're capable of.
That's true.
but in an efficient way, I don't know. And to have the cold blooded nature to kill your own siblings or half siblings and take power, even though you might want to, I feel like that's a whole different ball game. You've entered the mind of a psychopath in
Yeah.
a way.
You would have to have, yeah. I mean, you're at 13, you're doing that stuff. It's pretty radical, yeah, for sure. But he is in power, and he'll be in power until around the age of 50, roughly.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in there. With his death, really.
Yeah, with his death. He runs an autocracy, which auto is singular, right, by himself.
Yeah, self. Yeah.
So
And crassy from the Greek kratia for power, so power to oneself.
he makes all the decisions.
Yeah, I quoted it as absolute and arbitrary.
Absolute power.
Anything he wants, anytime, anywhere.
So it's what the 8th graders want but can't get because they don't have an autocracy.
Right. I mean, they struggle with free seating in the cafeteria.
That is true.
Let alone that kind of power.
Yeah, they would not be able to handle it. They have to show they're able to handle a little bit of freedom, but what's the saying? You give them an inch, they go a mile.
Yep, that's it.
So, yeah, and in power, he eventually starts building the Great Wall as we know it today. But there was already sections of the wall already up from the Warring States period.
Right. I mean, those different kingdoms had built walls to kind of help defend one another, and then my understanding was his wall, his accomplishment was to take and kind of fill in those gaps, and then continue to build west to create some kind of barrier from really like the Yellow Sea to kind of the Gobi Desert or that Taklamakan Desert, and help to section off, create a barrier where there wasn't a naturally occurring one, to protect China from the invaders from the north. Which that was something that had kind of happened during the end of the Zhou dynasty too. You had the fracturing of feudalism, but you also had these invaders from the north. The Huns invade China during that period, and so there's multiple things going on. And he's already unified China, so now he's attempting to kind of keep the Huns that he forced out away.
The irony.
Yeah. The fact that the Great Wall probably was more effective at, keeping the Chinese in than keeping the invaders out.
I'm just trying to find how much of the wall was made kind of during each period.
Oh, okay. Because I think I looked it up, and it's obviously not a straight measurement of it, but I'd seen somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13,000 miles of wall. But it's
that's a combination of everything, though.
Yes,
right?
that's all the way up until was it the Ming Dynasty,
right
at the end there. But it's not built in a straight line. It has to follow the terrain, so it zigzags, and there's sections that just sort of go off and stop, or that loop onto one another, and so it's kind of it looks like it's built arbitrarily, but if it follows the terrain to help close off different sections, it kind of makes sense there in that context.
Yeah, I have here. There's just some simple dimensions in different places, but off the top of my head here, I'm not seeing too much. But yeah, essentially they're building different sections of that wall.
Right. What I recall from the TED-Ed video, at least on size, was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 27 feet tall, 21 foot wide, something like that.
You don't know how many miles?
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure it gets mentioned in there. I was thinking somewhere like during the Qin Dynasty that it was somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 miles of wall constructed.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
But I can't remember where I pulled that number from, so I don't want to set that in stone as the hard and fast record. But I think it would be somewhere in that range.
You can look at that later and try to figure that out exactly. But
but despite all the bad, right, with the harsh rule and wielding of arbitrary power and the murdering of Confucian scholars and burning of books. All that, there are a few things that got kept that he did. Some things that were seen as good, actually unifying China.
Good choice of mustache, yeah.
Yep, definitely. I wish I could. It just doesn't grow that way.
Those eyebrows too.
On fleek.
On fleek.
But if you want to talk about kind of the uniformity that he institutes across China.
Yeah, he brings in a uniform currency, and what that means basically is that you're bringing in the same exact type of currency, which we went over in my class. It's money. Okay, some type of exchange, whether it could be gold, it could be coins, it could be something, but something that you could easily exchange for. No barter system, no none of that. And I tell my kids, imagine that if each state still had their own currency, because we had that where if I go to, Maryland or Pennsylvania, I have to exchange the money in order to get to get their money, because there's Pennsylvania dollars, there's Maryland dollars, there's Virginia dollars. There's not American bucks. There's no uniformity, back in the day. If we still had that, that'd be so chaotic.
Oh yeah, I mean
It'd be a mess.
it's hard
a
enough
nightmare.
to end up trying to buy something off the internet, and then you're buying from like the UK, and you have to convert to pounds and sort all that out. I mean, that's enough of a pain. If you had to do that like
day.
domestically every day,
Especially over here because we're so close to Maryland.
we are right across the
Yeah.
bridge. So yeah, I mean, could you imagine having to like have a toll on each side of the bridge, where like you travel to Maryland, then you have to exchange your money to pay the toll there, and then come?
You'd have to constantly carry two forms of currency
you
around.
really would.
Yeah, which when I went to Belize, they actually do with American dollars and
really?
the Belizean dollars. Yeah, because they just recently in the '80s became independent from Great Britain.
Okay.
And England, I guess.
That imperialism.
Yeah, I know. It's just there. And because the Queen actually is on the Belizean buck still. Yeah. It just kind of kept that. So, and the way they exchanged it was really cool because it wasn't even a big deal. I gave American bucks or Belizean dollars. It was just okay, boom. I can make change for both. They had accepted that system pretty well, but it's not the most efficient system.
And it's not. I assume it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of exchange.
I think it's like 2-to-1 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but just uniformity in general, bringing people together on that front really helps structure a society. Really helps bring people together, and that's going to make it more difficult to. Not that they're not going to have a warring states period again, but it's going to make it more difficult to have that civil war essentially. But yeah, like you said, he brought in legalism, but the people don't really like legalism very much because it is aggressively brutal. And this is going to bring this dynastic cycle to a forefront here with Qin Shui or Huangdi's son. So it doesn't last long. Do we know how long exactly it lasted?
All I know is it's a few years.
I mean, he lasted in there 15, I think.
Right, but it's not very long after his death.
No, it's a couple of years.
Yeah.
So maybe 20-some years, and he thought it'd last forever.
Yeah.
That's typically when you think something's going to last forever, it pretty much ends very quickly after that. What Hitler thought of the Third Reich would last 2,000 years or something like that, and it lasted 12 or 15, 14, something like that.
I mean, still an autocratic form of government, burning books, killing people that disagreed with them.
Exactly. It's not going to last, whether you think it will or not. It's just not. Somebody's going to rise up and throw you out of power, whether it be, not going to vote you out, obviously, but it's going to be by force.
Right.
And you're either going to die or you're going to leave the country and go to South America, like many of them did.
Yeah.
Or maybe Hitler's still alive. I love how people still think he's alive. He'd be like 130 or something at this point.
It's ridiculous at this point. So I'm looking over here. I'm becoming mindful of our time, or we're reaching like 45 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd want to move into Han Dynasty.
Definitely.
206 BC to 220 CE, so CE Common Era. We also exchanged that with AD Anno Domini, which means, Mr. Shank?
In the year of our Lord.
Yeah, very presumptuous to assume that it's our Lord. Which is why there's multiple dating systems, also why we removed the AD and go with CE
Just
for
more
Common
politically
Era.
correct.
Yeah.
With they're the ones that they overthrow the Qin dynasty, and then the Silk Road had already been there, but they're kind of just really opening the Silk Road up.
Yeah.
And we all know
trade.
the Silk Road is made of 100% silk, right?
Absolutely.
It's very slippery.
Absolutely.
Very slippery.
Just as much as this is China's golden age, so they actually built the buildings out of gold and the roads out of silk.
Even the tools they made them with were gold. Everything was gold.
That's how it works. In the mind of an 8th grader, that's how it works.
Their achievements consisted of paper, the compass, porcelain, and if you don't know what porcelain is, you weren't paying attention in my class. I know that much at least.
Yeah.
But it's fine china. And if you don't know what fine china is, there's very, very fancy plates. A certain designs and so forth are on that, and that we have some at my parents' house. They have been passed down from generation to generation. It's not as big as it used to be. People don't really collect that or use that, but it's very special occasions.
Yeah, I mean it's and I just typed it in to get the official definition, if you will, a white vitrified translucent ceramic, also known directly in the definition as china.
China, yeah,
because of where it originates.
yeah. That's when something's made so much. I mean, it's like when something's traded so much, they just call it the Silk Road. When something's made so much, they might just say, "Yeah, that's China."
China.
Yeah, which is it just shows you how much and how well it was like.
Yeah, I mean it's what I call my iPhone too. China.
China. Mine's just a piece of garbage. That's all I call it. Just cracked up completely. And they adopted the Confucian principles, which was big, which was huge for their consistency over 400 years in power and their golden age. Not to be confused with India's golden age with the Guptas,
right?
Which my students were confusing that, but they weren't.
Oh.
They weren't reading that today.
The golden age of any civilization, right? It's something we lay over it as historians. The time of greatest peace and prosperity. The Pax Sinica in China, the Chinese peace.
Pax Romana in Rome.
Yeah.
So we have the Confucian principles, which the government and the civil service. Did he add to the civil service, or is it more of just the test?
So my understanding is, as far as Confucianism goes, it's really just the test that goes into that. But something I was reading said that they actually drew from the Analects to create the test. So my assumption would be that it's different than like the civil service exam you would take today, which tests particular skills. I assume this does as well, but it probably also tests your knowledge of Ren, like your role in a relationship and that propriety, to be sure that wherever you're going to be, whatever position you're placed in, that you can respectfully hold that position. So I assume there would be some like manners part of that exam or something integrity. Like that.
Yeah. This is very, very interesting because it definitely made for a really efficient civilization for 400 years. And to put that in perspective, we're only at 242 here in America.
Yeah.
Who knows how many more we have, but we're not even close to Hans.
No.
We still have, at least another 150 years, maybe 200?
If.
Yeah, if. Almost double.
And I think that Confucianism is still a big idea in China today. Those principles that were established in government and education systems still exist today, even if it's not necessarily state backed, state instituted. They still exist. Like I told my students, it's kind of like with the caste system in India. The caste system formally is abolished. It's illegal to discriminate based on caste, but it's still there because of the long-standing tradition.
Yeah, they just kind of kept it with them, even though it's technically illegal. It's just very interesting, definitely. So, you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, for me, that really wraps up China, and it's interesting. We got all these notes on one sheet of paper.
Yeah.
For this entire conversation. I had a student tell me today that he took, for China alone, 4 pages front and back.
What? Did you write every word that you said?
It was every word. So, fluid note taking and drawing pictures. Get your sketch note on. Anything you can do to summarize that stuff. But so we did this in we're nearing 50 minutes. So 1 class period, all of China, on 1 sheet of notes.
Yeah,
that's effective.
But you know what they say though?
What's that?
China wasn't built in the night.
That's right. That is the adage. Yes.
But yeah, so this has been In the Back Room, Ancient China. I'm Mr. Shank.
And I'm Mr. Woods.
And thank you for listening. There'll be more episodes to come.
Have a great night.
Or else.